The banquet hall of the Hargrove Hotel smelled like money and fresh flowers, and the particular kind of silence that happens when everyone in a room has more to prove than to say. Mara Sutton stood near the far end of the reception table, her champagne untouched, watching her husband of 3 years work the room like he had been born to it, which she supposed he had. Brendan Cole moved through cocktail hour the way water moves through a crack in stone. Effortless, inevitable, wearing a smile she used to think was reserved only for her. He had not looked at her once since they arrived. She smoothed the front of her navy dress, the one she had borrowed from her co-worker Jess because she could not afford anything new after last month's hospital bills. Her younger sister Lily had been in and out of appointments for 6 months now. Nothing catastrophic yet, the doctors kept saying, but nothing resolved either, just the slow, expensive business of watching and waiting and hoping the numbers stayed stable. Brendan knew this. He had helped her fill out 2 insurance forms before losing interest in the topic entirely. Across the room he was laughing at something a woman in a red dress had said. His hand rested on the back of her chair. Not touching her, just near enough. Mara had seen it before. She understood what nearness meant when accompanied by that particular laugh. A server passed with a tray of crab cakes, and she shook her head. Her stomach had been in a knot since they left the apartment, since Brendan had looked at her in the elevator and said, "You're wearing that?" without waiting for an answer. She had worn it anyway. She was tired of changing herself to fit a shape that kept moving. The evening stretched on, a keynote about quarterly growth, applause, more champagne she did not drink. At one point Brendan appeared at her elbow to introduce her to a senior partner whose name she immediately forgot, and then he was gone again, absorbed back into the crowd before she could finish her sentence. She found herself thinking about Lily, about the way her sister had squeezed her hand at the last appointment and said, "You don't have to stay for all of this, you know," meaning the waiting room, but maybe also meaning something larger. By 9 o'clock, Mara set her glass down on a passing tray and walked toward the exit. No dramatic moment, no announcement. She simply stopped performing. The October air outside was cold enough to sting, and she had left her coat inside, but she did not go back for it. She walked down the hotel steps and kept moving, her heels clicking against the wet sidewalk, and for the first time all evening she felt like she could breathe. Her phone buzzed. "Brendan, where are you? The Hartwell partners are still here." She read it twice. "Not are you okay? Not I noticed you left." Just the partners, the room, the performance she had failed to maintain. She typed back slowly. "I'm done." "Don't wait up." 3 dots appeared. "Then don't be dramatic, Mara. Get back here." She turned her phone face down in her bag and kept walking. She did not know where she was going. Chicago at night had a way of absorbing you, all that lake wind and amber streetlight and the sound of the L somewhere above your head. She walked until her feet ached, and then she found a diner on a side street near the river, the kind of place with laminated menus and a coffee machine that sounded like it was arguing with itself. She slid into a booth by the window. A waitress named Paulette, who had the no-nonsense energy of someone who had seen every variety of crying woman come through that door, brought her coffee without being asked. "You want pie," Paulette said. Mara almost laughed. "Yes," she said. "Please." The coffee was strong and the pie was cherry, and outside the window the city kept moving, indifferent to the fact that her marriage had just ended. She was not sure when exactly it had ended. Maybe tonight. Maybe a year ago. Maybe on the afternoon. She realized she had started lying to Lily about how things were going at home because she did not want her sick sister spending worry on something that could not be fixed. Her phone rang. The name on the screen stopped her cold. Franklin Caruso. She had met Brendan's father exactly 4 times. Once at the rehearsal dinner, where he had arrived late and left early and shaken her hand with the careful formality of a man who measured people before deciding how much to give them. Once at a Christmas gathering that lasted 40 minutes before he was called away. Twice at events like tonight's, where he watched from a corner and said very little. He was a tall man, somewhere in his late 50s, with close-cropped silver hair and the kind of stillness that made rooms rearrange themselves around him. Brendan spoke of him rarely and with a specific carefulness. "Not fear exactly, more like the way you talk about weather that has taught you a lesson," she answered. "Mara." His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that had learned to carry weight without raising itself. "I understand the evening did not go well." She almost laughed again. That might be understating it. A pause. When he spoke again, there was something different in his tone. Careful, almost gentle. "I'm not calling on behalf of my son. I want to be clear about that." She frowned. "Then why are you calling?" "Because I've been watching you try to hold that marriage together for 3 years," Franklin Caruso said. "And I think you deserve better than to spend tonight alone on a street corner wondering what comes next." She looked around the diner. "I'm in a booth, actually. There's pie." Good. A pause that might have contained something like relief. Stay there. I'm sending someone. Mr. Caruso. You are not obligated to agree to anything, he said. I only want to offer you a conversation, one that is overdue. He paused. There are things about this family that Brendan should have told you before you married him. I am sorry he did not. The line went quiet before she could respond. She sat with her coffee and her pie, and the particular vertigo of a night that had already turned her entire understanding of her life upside down, wondering what a man she barely knew could possibly need to tell her. 15 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside. The man who came through the diner door was compact and efficient, with the quiet alertness of someone paid to notice things. He introduced himself only as Walsh. Mara left $40 for Paulette and followed him out. The drive took them north and then west, out of the density of the city and into the kind of suburb that did not look like a suburb from the outside. Just a road lined with old oak trees, and then a gate, and then a gravel drive curving through the dark toward a house that emerged from the tree line like something out of another century. Stone and slate and tall windows lit from within, set back on grounds that seemed to go on longer than she could see. This was not the modest Evanston townhouse Brendan had described as his childhood home. Franklin Caruso met her at the door himself. He was in a charcoal sweater and pressed dark trousers, and without the armor of a formal event, he looked both less imposing and more real. He extended a hand. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know this is stranger than the rest of tonight," she said. He almost smiled. "Come in." The interior was all warm wood and high ceilings and books, more books than she had expected, shelved floor to ceiling in a hallway that led to a sitting room with a fireplace already burning. He gestured her toward a chair and she sat, pulling the borrowed dress tighter because she was still cold from the walk. "Can I ask," she said, "how you knew I left?" Franklin settled into the chair across from her. "Because I was there," he said. "I attend most of Cole Venture's senior events. I stay in the background. Old habit." He paused. "I saw you standing alone for 2 hours. I saw Brendan introduce you to Hartwell and walk away before you finished speaking. I saw you set down your glass and leave." Mara felt heat rise to her face, not embarrassment, something closer to anger at having been witnessed in that particular helplessness. "Then you saw more than he did," she said. Franklin nodded slowly. "My son has my ambition," he said, "but he did not inherit my understanding of what ambition costs when you direct it at the wrong things." He leaned forward, his hands folded. "Mara, I owe you an explanation, perhaps more than one." What followed was not what she had expected. Franklin Caruso did not run an import business. He did not manage logistics, which was what Brendan had told her, vaguely, years ago, and which she had never pressed because Brendan discouraged pressing. What Franklin ran was something older and more complicated, a network of financial operations that existed in the space between what was visible and what was not, built over decades by a family that had come to Chicago from Calabria, with nothing but the willingness to do what no one else would touch. Mara listened. The fire crackled. She did not look away. "You're telling me your family is," she started. "I am telling you that the world Brendan grew up in is not the world he described to you," Franklin said, "and that your connection to this family, whether you choose to remain in it or not, carries implications you were never given the chance to understand." She absorbed this for a long moment. "Are you threatening me?" "No." He said it without hesitation. "I am warning you. There is a difference." His eyes held hers, steady and grave. "There are people in my world who view loose ends as problems to be resolved. I am not one of those people. But I cannot guarantee everyone around me shares that restraint." Mara felt the cold settle deeper. "What does that mean for me?" "It means that simply leaving Brendan does not fully remove you from this situation," Franklin said. "It means that I would like to offer you something more concrete than a taxi home and a hope that no one notices you." She looked at him for a long moment, this man she had catalogued as distant, as peripheral, as the uncomfortable silence at the end of a holiday table. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Franklin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because Brendan wasted something rare, and because I have spent 20 years surrounding myself with people who want something from me, and very few who simply treat me like a person." He paused. "You brought my son a plate of food at the Christmas gathering 2 years ago because you noticed I hadn't eaten. You didn't announce it. You didn't make it a moment. You just did it." Mara remembered. She hadn't thought he'd noticed. "That is not a small thing," he said. "In my world, it is almost unheard of." She slept that night in a guest room with high ceilings and a window that overlooked a garden gone silver in the moonlight, wrapped in the specific disorientation of a person whose life has come unmoored from everything familiar. She did not sleep well, but she slept better than she had in months. In the morning, there was coffee and fresh bread and a view of the garden in early autumn light. Franklin joined her at the breakfast table with a newspaper he did not read, and they sat in a silence that was somehow companionable. "I need to tell you something," Mara said. "My sister is sick. Not critically, but it's ongoing, and it's expensive, and it's the reason I've been staying in a situation I should have left a year ago." She looked at her coffee. "I need you to know that, because I don't want to be in any arrangement, whatever you're proposing, where you don't understand my actual circumstances." Franklin set down his newspaper. "What does she need?" "Consistent specialist care. There's a program at Northwestern that might help, but there's a waiting list and a cost gap that insurance won't cover." He nodded once. "I can address that. I'm not asking you to." "I know you're not," he said. "That's why I'm offering." Mara stayed 3 days at the estate before she made any decision. She walked the grounds, which were wider than they appeared from the house, edged by a creek that ran amber in the October light. She read in the library, which held everything from legal theory to Sicilian poetry. She had dinner with Franklin each evening and learned, slowly, the shape of who he was beneath the position he occupied. He had married young, a woman named Celia, whom he described as the only person who had ever argued with him and been right. Celia had died 11 years ago, a sudden thing, and he had not recovered from it the way people imagine recovery happens in movies. He had simply continued, built more, controlled more, filled the space with work and infrastructure and the constant management of an empire that never stopped requiring his attention. Did Brendan know her well? Mara asked one evening. "He was 19 when she died," Franklin said. "Old enough to grieve, too young to know what to do with it. He became someone who does not get attached easily." He looked at the fire. "I failed him in that. I should have taught him differently." On the 4th day, Brendan arrived. Mara heard him before she saw him, raised voice in the foyer, the specific pitch of a man who has decided that anger is more productive than accountability. She came downstairs to find him standing in the entrance hall in a rumpled suit, his jaw tight, his eyes moving from Franklin to her and back again with an expression she recognized, betrayal performing itself as rage. "This is what you did," he said to her. "You ran to my father. Your father called me," she said. I answered, "You've been here 4 days, Mara. 4 days." He laughed, but there was nothing light in it. "Do you know how that looks? Do you know what people are saying?" "I genuinely do not care," she said, and as she said it, she understood it was true. Brendan turned to Franklin. "You had no right to interfere in my marriage." "Your marriage ended," Franklin said, "when you spent an entire evening ignoring your wife at a company function and then texted her to come back because the partners were watching. I did not interfere. I arrived after the fact." Brendan's face went through several things at once. "She's not your concern." "I've decided she is," Franklin said simply. The quiet in his voice had a particular quality, not threatening, just final. The voice of someone who does not make statements he does not mean. Brendan looked at Mara. Something shifted in his expression, not remorse exactly, more the frustrated recognition of a man who had not expected to lose. "I did love you," he said, "for what it's worth." She thought about the elevator. "You're wearing that?" The cold marble of an apartment she had tried to fill with warmth he never came home early enough to notice. "I know," she said. "I think you just loved the idea of the life more than the person in it with you." He didn't argue. That, more than anything, told her what she needed to know. Franklin had him escorted out quietly, 2 men appearing at the right moment without needing to be asked, and then the house was calm again. That evening she found Franklin in the library. He was standing at the window with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched, looking out at the garden where the last of the autumn roses were holding on. "I'm sorry," she said, "that he came here. Don't be." He turned from the window. "He was always going to." He paused. "Are you all right?" She considered the question. "I think so. It was easier than I expected." "Because you had already let go," he said. "Long before last night," she nodded. They stood in comfortable quiet for a moment, the library breathing around them, and then he said, "There's something I haven't told you yet, about why the warning I gave you the first night is more urgent than I made it sound." He set down his glass and told her about a man named Harlan Vega. Vega ran a competing organization. Younger, less disciplined, and hungry in the specific way of someone who had watched others build things and decided he deserved them. He had been pressing against Franklin's operations for 2 years, looking for the soft spot, the vulnerability. He had found in recent months that the soft spot was not financial or structural. It was personal. "He knows about Lily," Franklin said. Mara felt the air go out of the room. "How, Brendan," Franklin said carefully, "has been talking to people he should not be talking to. I don't believe he intended to give Vega leverage. I believe he was reckless and angry and didn't consider the implications." He paused. "But the result is the same. Vega is aware that you have a sister in ongoing medical treatment. He is aware that you are now connected to me. He may see that as an opening. She sat down, her hands were steady, which surprised her. What do we do? We move Lily, he said. Tonight. To a facility I trust, with staff I know. We tell her it's an upgrade in her care, which it genuinely will be. And then do you deal with someone like that? Franklin's expression was measured. Carefully, he said, and thoroughly. She looked at him across the library, this man she had known as a silhouette at the edge of family occasions, and who had become in 4 days the clearest thing in a very blurred picture. I'm not leaving, she said. I want to be clear about that. Whatever comes in moved in his face. Not surprise. He was not, she was learning, a man who was easily surprised. Something quieter. Gratitude, maybe. Or recognition. I know, he said. I wasn't going to ask you to. The weeks that followed were organized chaos. Lily was moved without incident to a residential treatment center in Lake Forest that Mara had previously thought was out of her reach in every sense. When she saw the room, bright, clean, with a view of the lake and a team of specialists who actually returned calls, she had to excuse herself to the hallway to collect herself. When she came back, Lily looked at her with the particular clarity of a younger sister who has always seen more than she lets on. Okay, Lily said. So tell me about him. There's nothing to tell, Mara. Lily said it with the patience of someone who has known her for 30 years. It's complicated, Mara said. Everything worth having is, Lily said. Is he good to you? She thought about the morning he had left a book on the breakfast table with a page marked no note, just the open page. She had read the passage and understood it was his way of saying something he did not yet have the language for. She thought about the way he listened when she spoke. Not waiting for his turn, actually listening, the way so few people did. Yes, she said, he's good to me. Lily nodded, satisfied. Then figure out the rest. The threat from Harlan Vega materialized on a grey November morning in the form of a black car that appeared outside the treatment center and did not leave for 3 hours. Walsh reported it to Franklin, who made 2 phone calls and then came to find Mara in the conservatory, where she had been trying, unsuccessfully, to read. We need to talk about what comes next, he said. She set down her book. Tell me, he told her. Vega was not going to back down through negotiation. He had already refused 2 attempts at a structured conversation, read by everyone in Franklin's circle as a signal that he wanted confrontation rather than resolution. The question was not whether something would happen, but when, and on whose terms. I have people I trust, Franklin said, and I have options Vega is not aware of, but I need to be away from here for a few days to manage it. He paused, and she heard in the pause everything the words were not saying. The risk, the uncertainty, the fact that men who go to manage situations like this do not always come back from them. I want you to stay here. I want Walsh with you at all times. Mara stood up and crossed to where he was standing. She took his hand, which seemed to catch him off guard. He looked at their hands and then at her face. You come back, she said. That's the only condition I have. Franklin was still for a moment. Then he lifted her hand and pressed it briefly to his lips, and she felt the steadiness in him, the thing underneath all that control that was. She was learning, simply the shape his care took. I'll come back, he said. He was gone for 4 days. She did not sleep well. She spent the time with Lily, who was having a good week, who made her play cards and watch terrible television and eat more than she had in months. She walked the grounds of the estate in the mornings with Walsh shadowing her at a polite distance. She sat by the fire in the evenings and read the poetry book she had found on the library shelf. Montale in Italian, which she did not speak but somehow still found comforting in its sounds. On the 4th night she heard the gravel crunch. She was at the front door before the car stopped. Franklin stepped out looking like a man who had not slept and had made decisions he would spend time with later, his coat wrinkled and his jaw dark with stubble. When he saw her standing on the steps, something in his bearing shifted. She went down to him without thinking. He caught her, and they stood like that for a moment in the cold, his arms around her and her face against his shoulder, neither of them saying anything because nothing needed to be said. It's done, he said finally. Vega has agreed to withdraw. Completely. There won't be further contact. How? The pulled back enough to look eye expression. I found something he valued more than conflict. It tends to work, with the right person. She searched his face. And Brendan? A pause. Brendan has been given the opportunity to relocate to the West Coast office. He has taken it. I believe the distance will be good for him. He looked at her steadily. He will not be a problem. They stood in the cold for another moment, the estate quiet around them, and then she said, Come inside. You look terrible. A real laugh, surprised out of him, the kind she had not yet heard from him. It changed his face completely. Thank you, he said. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Winter settled over the grounds with a particular gentleness that year. Snow came in December and softened everything. The formal garden, the creek, the long oak-lined drive. The house felt different than it had when Mara first arrived, less like a stage set and more like a place where people actually lived, where she actually lived. She had taken over the management of Franklin's charitable foundation, which had been running on autopilot for years under the supervision of an accountant who was competent but unimaginative. She rebuilt the grant priorities, established partnerships with 2 school programs in the neighborhoods south of the city, and found herself more engaged in her work than she had been in years. Franklin watched her do it with an expression she was still learning to read. Pride was part of it, she thought, but also something more personal, like watching something he had almost given up on come back to life. One evening in January, he came to find her in the conservatory where she had made a habit of working in the late afternoon light. He sat down across from her with the careful deliberateness of someone who has been thinking about something for a long time and has finally decided to say it. "I need to tell you something," he said. She closed her laptop. "All right. I have spent 11 years since Celia died not allowing myself to want anything that wasn't strategic," he said. "Relationships, presence, care. I managed all of it at a distance because proximity felt like risk I could not afford." He paused. "I was wrong about that. I understand that now." Mara felt her heart do something complicated. "You came here in the middle of the worst night of your life," he continued, "and you asked nothing of me except honesty. And somewhere in the past few months, you have made this house feel like—" He paused, searching for the word. "Like there is someone in it again." She did not speak. She waited. Franklin reached into the pocket of his jacket and set a small box on the table between them. Dark velvet, old-fashioned in a way that felt intentional rather than careless. "I am not a simple man," he said. "My world is not simple, and I cannot promise you it ever will be. But I can promise you honesty and protection, and that I will never once make you feel like an afterthought in your own life." He opened the box. The ring inside was antique, a square-cut stone set in dark gold, clearly something with history. "This was Celia's mother's," he said. "She wanted it to go to someone who deserved it. I think she would have liked you considerably." Mara looked at the ring and then at him and felt something settle in her chest, like a door closing on a cold room. "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." He put the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. She laughed at that, and so did he, and outside the conservatory windows the snow kept falling quietly on the garden. They married in March, when the first crocuses were pushing through the last snow on the grounds. Lily was there, in a yellow dress, looking better than she had in 2 years. Walsh stood near the back with his hands clasped and the specific expression of a man trying to remain professional at a moment that was making him emotional. Franklin's few closest people were present, not many, and all of them genuine, which she was learning was the way he preferred things. Brendan did not attend. He sent a card, brief and oddly gracious. She read it once and put it away. The ceremony was held in the conservatory, which had become her favorite room, with the late winter light coming through the glass and the smell of the potted jasmine she had planted in October. She walked in alone, which she had chosen, because she was not the same woman who had stood outside a Chicago hotel 2 years ago in a borrowed dress, waiting for someone to notice her. She was someone else now, someone she had not known she was going to become. Franklin waited for her at the end of the aisle with Lily beside him, which he had arranged without being asked, because he paid attention, because that was who he was. And when he saw her, his expression did that thing she loved, the thing where all the careful control went briefly quiet and what was underneath it simply showed. Afterward, when the guests had gone and Lily was resting and the house was warm and still, they sat together in the library while snow fell for what felt like the last time that season. She had her feet tucked under her and his copy of Montal open in her lap, which he was pretending to disapprove of. "Your Italian is terrible," he said. "My Italian is non-existent," she said. "That's different." He took the book from her gently and read her 3 lines in the original, and then the translation, and she listened to his voice in the quiet room, and thought about the night in the diner, the cherry pie, the phone call she had almost not answered. Strange how a single moment could contain the entire rest of your life waiting to be opened. "Are you happy?" he asked. She thought about the woman who had stood at the edge of a banquet hall with an untouched glass of champagne, invisible in a room full of people, waiting for her husband to look at her just once. "I didn't know what happy actually felt like," she said. "I thought I did. But I was just relieved most of the time. Relieved when he wasn't cold, relieved when a dinner went smoothly, relieved when we got through a weekend without distance." She looked at Franklin. "This is different. This is actual happiness. I can tell the difference now." He reached over and took her hand. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Outside, the snow turned to rain, soft and steady, washing the last of the winter away. Somewhere on the grounds the creek would be running higher in the morning. The crocuses would survive it. They always did. Mara rested her head on his shoulder and let the sound of the rain fill the room. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was exactly where she was supposed to be.